All right, so just a little bit of background into the book. As I say, we're basically looking at the social construction of reality by focusing on how reality is constructed, specifically kind of how social organizations can be functional, and how this reality is constructed by focusing on the personal, kind of the social psychological dynamics of how people recognize situations, how they think about situations, how they act within situations. And then the situations themselves will be kind of the social structures, the obstacles, the limitations that people face, and how people basically manage and navigate those obstacles and limitations. So kind of looking at the social and the personal and how those two kind of work together, and through the interplay of the two, the reality that is created. So kind of keep that in mind as you move through the book. So kind of touching on the three different types of order in the lecture for today, basically tie it into Fine's book, but I can also, discuss this, outside of the book. As I say, although he talks about restaurants specifically, you can generalize this to other workplaces. You can generalize it to other social organizations. So earlier I talked about the classroom. So basically, for education to occur and to be functional, you need these three different types of orders. So first, in the classroom, you have to have the physical order. And the physical order, we could say, would be you need to have enough chairs for students. You need to have projectors that work properly. If somebody has a PowerPoint, they want to show the class. If you want to write on the chalkboard, you need to have chalk there so you can actually write on the board. So when the chalk is there, when the projector is projecting, and when you have enough seats in the classroom for students, then that physical order is in place. But when you start to, not have those physical things in place, you lack chalk, the projector is not projecting, there are not enough seats in the classroom, that's when the dysfunction can occur. So we would say, even though, maybe the social order is in place, the symbolic order is in place, because the function, the physical order is not in place, then the education is going to be problematic. Dysfunction is going to emerge. So we say, we have these three smaller orders, kind of plural, and they all need to come together to create kind of order as a whole with a capital O. And so now we can get into social order. So in the classroom, basically, we have two different main roles, the role of the instructor and the role of the student. And so again, if the physical order is in place, but if we're not doing our social duties, the responsibilities attached to our roles, then the education is not going to occur. There's going to be disorder, dysfunction, and nobody's going to be learning anything. Nobody's going to be teaching anything. So as an instructor, I need to come to class prepared. I need to prepare a lecture. I need to be following a lesson plan. And when I do that, then I contribute to that social order being there. And when I contribute to that social order, again, I'm contributing to overall order being in that space. Likewise, when you come to class, having read the assigned readings, having completed the assignments, when you're engaging one another, engaging the instructor with questions and thoughts, then everybody's kind of playing their part, performing their responsibilities, and that social order is in place. But again, if you're not coming to class on time, if you're not doing the readings, if you're disengaged, I could be doing my part, but as long as you're not doing yours, there's only going to be teaching going on and very little learning. So again, everybody needs to kind of play their parts and perform their responsibilities for social order to occur. We have the physical order, everything's there that needs to be there, everything's working that needs to work, and the social order comes in. Everybody's performing their responsibilities attached to the roles. Then again, we're getting closer to overall order, overall functionality in the classroom. So finally, we need to have that symbolic order in play. We need to respect one another. We need to respect kind of a chain of command. So if you're, speaking over the your fellow students, if you're not giving your fellow students the deserved respect that they have in that role of your fellow student, of your classmate, then that's going to be disruptive. Students are not going to be getting along. Students are going to be more worried about people calling them out or making fun of them and then actually paying attention and learning. And the same thing, if you're asking me questions and I'm kind of making you feel stupid for asking a question, something like that, then I'm not giving you the proper respect in your role as a student. And that's going to be more disruptive for the educational environment. So, we may have the physical order in place, we may have the social order in place, but if the respect's not there, that symbolic order is going to be dysfunctional, and that's going to contribute to overall order being disruptive too. But on the other hand, if everybody kind of is recognizing the chain of command, if everybody's recognizing one another with a proper respect, then we have those three types of order in place, and that creates functionality in the classroom as a whole. So again, although Fine talks about a restaurant, we can apply these three different types of order to other organizations as well, and kind of recognize how they all coexist at once, and they all need to be orderly to have order with a capital O. So any questions about those?
No questions.
Okay, so let me kind of tie this into the next part, because here is where we really get specifically into the first part of your paper. And specifically, I ask you to talk about the role of play in the work environment, the role of play within social organizations. And to me, it's an interesting discussion. It's interesting to think about because, often, a coach will tell players, don't mess around, no horseplay, take this seriously. The teacher will tell students, stop messing around and pay attention. And, the boss will tell her workers that, do that stuff on your own time. When you're at work, you got to focus on work. So, we don't want to go to the extreme and say that, you want to play all the time. You want to mess around all the time at work, because that will be counterproductive. But Fine actually argues that a little bit of play, a little bit of leisure within the social organization is actually beneficial for the organization. So here, basically, what we start to see is when people are kind of socializing with one another, not only as coworkers, but as individuals. When people are joking with one another, pulling pranks, coming up with different nicknames, what this does, it starts to build a work culture. And so, think about, being in a classroom. Sometimes, the first couple weeks of class, it's a little bit awkward because you really don't know your fellow students that well yet. You don't really know the teacher. You don't know how things are going to be working. But after a couple weeks, you start to get to know one another. You talk, you laugh, you just kind of recognize how things operate. And that kind of leisure side, play side of the classroom contributes to a classroom culture developing. And when that classroom culture develops, people feel emotionally connected. These bonds are created that weren't there to begin with. So, the work culture, the classroom culture doesn't create itself. It's not simply there. You have to create it. And when you do create it, students will have each other's back. Students will want to help each other out doing group activities or just, during a general discussion. When somebody may be struggling, another student may raise his hand and try to help, his fellow student out. If that culture is not there, then typically you're not looking to help one another out. You're just kind of there for yourself. And so Fine basically, generalizes that to the work environment in a restaurant. He says that, people will be more likely to perform their roles in the social order, even though they may not like the job, they may not like their pay, but because there's this work culture presence that becomes more about the team than the individual on the team, then people will do their roles, do their responsibilities, even though it may not be fun for them. They may not enjoy the job that much, but they're part of a larger team and they want to, do what they can do for that team. And the same thing for, the physical order. You may not be happy with your equipment, but you compromise. And you compromise because, again, you're part of a larger team and you care about your teammates. You care about the restaurant as a whole because you have that work culture that brings people together. So that's the way we can connect kind of the role of play and leisure to functionality, to creating order. Because when you have leisure and play going on at work, the different forms would be, the pranking, the joking around, the socializing, all those things start to build this work culture. And when you have this work culture, you start to establish order in those three different dimensions because people have each other's back. People actually care about some type of greater good rather than simply you as an individual within the collective. So that's what you're kind of looking at for that first part of the paper, connecting the play to building a work culture and also being specific about the types of play that create this work culture, whether it be pranking or joking. So that's when I ask you to come up with a couple examples of how this works. You would talk about pranking, you would talk about nicknaming at work and how that builds that kind of cohesive culture and how that culture then lends itself to people being productive, being functional, rather than being non-productive and dysfunctional for the organization. So that's what I wanted to touch on a little bit differently compared to how I talked about it in today's lecture. So now let me turn it back over to any of you. Do you have any thoughts or any questions about this?
Not right now.
Okay. So yeah, that's what I wanted to touch on for today. And what I'll do now is I'll stop the recording. And if you have any kind of specific questions for me, feel free to hang out and we can talk about anything you want.